Finishes and factions catching action.
Hi, I'm Rich.
And hi, I'm Adam.
And this is Finishes and Factions NXT edition from Orlando, Florida in the Performance Center.
Yeah, this was the episode that went out on the that was live on the 21st of January and obviously available through Netflix for everybody else. And I'm going to give a quick pre-warning on this particular episode, as we do with all of our NXT episodes, is that you will find that we don't know a massive amount about the superstars, and we will talk about the fact that we've had to sit and research who some of them are. It's because we're not terribly as experienced with NXT as we are with both Raw and SmackDown. It's a bit of a learning curve, but we'll get there. So yeah, let's jump in.
Yeah, so we had a bit of a recap at the start of previous episodes and what we were going to expect from this episode. And then it kind of threw us pretty much straight in at the deep end with the first match, to be fair.
So there were a few notes before we start. The Eternal Workhorse herself, Bayley, is in attendance in the building for NXT again this week. This makes a fifth appearance on televised events in the last
last five episodes.
I was going to say she's 5 for 5 as far as appearances go, as we've had her on 2 Raws now, 2 NXTs and a SmackDown. I think it's maybe she might have a week. She might have a day off on Friday night. On Friday night, who knows?
I doubt it.
The other small bit of business I'd love to bring to everybody's attention is that we did have Corey Graves on commentary, making it a bit of a 3-man booth, and this sort of caused I think there was a little bit of controversy maybe around this decision, as Corey Graves didn't really seem to appreciate the decision being thrust upon him. Or at least that was the impression that a lot of people seem to have out in the WWE universe. I think mostly led by some of Corey Graves' social media posts.
Yeah, his wife told him to shut the fuck up. Carmella told him to behave, and that's pretty much what he's done.
Either that, or I don't think it's part of a work. I think it is genuine that he was disappointed to be taken off. That he was taken off Raw, I believe it was.
Yes.
He was taken off Raw and essentially saw it as a demotion to go down to NXT, and contribute to a 3-man booth. I've got a feeling we're still going to see him at PLE events, and PLE events may end up being 3-man booth, as in one from Raw, one from NXT, one from SmackDown, which I think they've done in the past. Mm-hmm. And I think this might be the reason why Corey Graves has been sent down to NXT. That, and obviously he was an ex NXT star himself. So, but yeah, in a bit of a break from how WWE seem to have done it since the beginning of the Netflix era, they jumped straight in with match 1 this week, rather than treating us to about a couple of dozen promos before we get into any real action. And
kind of enjoyed it, to be fair, though.
Oh, 100%. It was a very refreshing break, and this was one of 3 title defenses on the card this evening. So first and foremost, we had this was the Men's North American NXT Championship, currently held by Tony D'Angelo of the D'Angelo family, and was being and the challenger was Ridge Holland. Now, we saw these two at the end of during last week's NXT episode have a bit of a parking lot brawl, which was interesting, and we also were treated to being told that Tony had recently passed the 100 days mark as reigning defending champion.
Yeah, it's a nice little interesting statistic to get there as well. That backstage parking lot brawl was interesting as well. I quite enjoy a good old brawl. And you definitely knew coming into this that it was not going to be tame and peaceful at all, especially with the fact that you had Shawn Spears show up quite early on into the match as well to kind of push a distraction.
So I struggled with Shawn Spears again. Back to the little preamble I had at the beginning of this episode is that I'm not terribly familiar with a lot of the NXT talent, and to the best of my knowledge, neither is Rich. However, we do know Shawn Spears, but under a slightly different name. And what originally triggered my interest in him was that he had, through certain angles, he had a very similar sort of facial structure and very similar expressions to one Damien Sandow, but that's not how we know Shawn Spears at all. Does the name Ty Dillinger ring any bells for you there, Rich? You remember that one?
I do.
So that is Shawn Spears.
No.
They are the same person.
I recognised him, but I couldn't put my finger on where. But fair play to finding out now.
Again, research during the night, and we have seen Shawn Spears on an episode on NXT as well. He was in the Panaway promo, I think it was last week's NXT, where he was actually chatting to a member of the family, being Rizzo. It was I put it down as he was trying to essentially extract her out of the family, which she didn't really seem that enraptured about doing. But yeah, that was how we sort of know Shawn Spears. But he's seems to be taking a bit more of an active role this week in walking out in the beginning parts of this match.
He takes an active role in coming out, but he's one of those, he doesn't actually get his hands dirty at all. He literally just stands there and just watches. There's nothing, he's literally just his presence at the point is enough to put off the guys in the ring. So,
but credit given where credit's due, Tony D'Angelo didn't spend that much time focused on Spears at all. And in terms of the match itself, a very sort of physically aggressive match, very evenly matched fight between the two of them. It was difficult to see one moment to the next who was sort of holding any sort of advantage or anything like that. But Spears did inevitably get involved again, not getting his hands dirty as such, but very much inserting himself into the situation to be able to get that to influence the outcome of the match almost.
Yeah, with his goons getting involved to be able to cause the distraction as well. And then this was a name I had to go back and look at, to be fair. Didn't know who Izzy Dame was, and for some reason the subtitles gave me a completely different name. But
yeah, the subtitles this week weren't terribly reliable. I noticed this as well. But Izzy Dame we have seen before. Again, same promo I referenced earlier on, the Panaway promo from last week's NXT. She's the one she is the young lady who was talking about the fact that she no longer owes the family anything. And we heard her say something very similar after this match ended.
Yeah, now they're even
as well. Yeah, so she said something very similar last week. And I don't know if this is pre-existing from when from before our time watching NXT potentially. This is a pre-existing storyline or something to that extent. It's difficult to fill the blanks in there, I'm afraid.
Without going back and watching an awful lot of content that we might not necessarily have the time to absorb.
No, this is it. We've both got full-time obligations outside of this podcast to keep us to keep us busy in the background. But yeah, ultimately this match ends in Tony D'Angelo retaining in a rather sort of chaotic and fast-paced finish, to the point that when I was watching this, I had to go back, and I think I may have watched the same section about 6 or 7 times just to try and fully absorb everything that had gone on, so that I could make sure that I'd got a lot of it noted down. But yeah, Izzy Dame comes in, takes out Ridge Holland, and essentially retreats back out of the ring, saying, "I no longer owe anybody." But it's, I've got a feeling there's a part of me that wants to believe that maybe Izzy Dame is making up the fact that she feels like she owes the family something. Maybe is she trying to work her way into the family instead? Is this it could potentially end in a feud between her and Rizzo, I believe, but nothing so far, or nothing that seems to have nothing that seems to have made itself known.
I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about this one. It was definitely one of those storylines that got me this week to a point where I'm like, yeah, no, I'm looking forward to being able to see where this continues.
Yeah, definitely. And if you've listened to our NXT episodes before, you'll know that that's actually a first for Rich while we've been doing this podcast. It's a case that the NXT stuff has really sort of gone over our heads, and it's been something we've really struggled with. So to find something that we've both taken a genuine interest in is a step in the right direction, folks. So,
for me, if it's just that gimmick that Tony D'Angelo's got with the whole gangster Godfather thing, but it kind of makes me want to go and watch the movie, and with that, it kind of like, yeah, I'll go back and watch the next episode of that story.
I can understand that because I feel very much the same. It's the pinstripes. I quite like the pinstripes, and yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there to appreciate, I feel.
Yeah, it was quite good.
But let's keep it moving forward. I've got the next item on the docket being the locker room promo. Now,
Tyson DuPont, Tyreek Igwe, and Wes Lee, I believe, were some of the gentlemen that were talking backstage when it started.
Yeah, so these were the sort of main 3 antagonists, I would say. Sort of begin by antagonizing Dion Lennox, who we saw very briefly last week on NXT have a very brief exchange with Obafemi about, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to be. I will be challenging
who
you
that
for
guy was.
Your title.
Again, I knew I'd seen him somewhere. Couldn't put my face on it yet. Last week's episode of NXT where he was talking to Obafemi he wasn't around for too much longer, but they did have a nice little pop at Trick Williams. I thought I couldn't help but giggle at that. That's the sort of thing I would have done if I was in a locker room somewhere. I'd have made the same sort of comments.
See, the pop at Trick Williams was great. The response that was given, that guy slapped the history out of Wes Lee. It was a phenomenal slap, and I've seen that it's been clipped by WWE themselves to be able to put out as short form content on their social media. And that slap was amazing.
Will Smith could learn a few lessons from that guy, I tell you.
Oh, 100%. But yeah, I think this sort of speaks to Trick Williams' mindset. He's not happy. He's not in a mood to be fucked with. I mean, last week we saw very briefly that he put out some kind of social media post saying I'm sort of reevaluating what's important to me, and this week he seems to have come back with an absolute vengeance.
Well, it's not the only time we see him in this episode, and it does build towards that next encounter with him. So I think the way they've worked this was actually a really good angle.
There's a lot of angles at play.
It was just
there's a lot of angles at play, but we'll build to that in as the same way that the episode did a little bit later on in the broadcast. So
following on the same way the episode did, they gave us a nice VT for NXT Vengeance, which is in Washington on the 15th of February.
Yes, I don't know much about the card for this just yet. I don't know if they've started advertising the actual
too
card.
much into it. I was hoping there'd be something on next week's NXT which would build it for me without me having to do the research. And then a little bit more filled in. We had the same thought, I'm guessing.
Well, my thought is that they'll get Saturday night's main event out of the way. They've then got the Rumble to build to, but they can build to Vengeance Day in DC after Saturday night's main event. If they build to too much too quickly, it gets confusing for the fan base. I mean, I'm a simple soul as it is. It doesn't take a lot to confuse me.
You're already men after all.
Well, yeah, this is it. I think after that, it was a in-ring promo with
Bayley.
Everybody's favorite every show every week Bayley coming out to quite a sizable pop for an NXT crowd.
Yeah, it was quite a populated NXT crowd as well. I didn't actually pick up a figure for how many people were there this week. I'm not sure what the Performance Center holds, so
they don't put out like attendance figures for NXT shows. I've noticed this in previous weeks that I've watched as well, is that they don't talk about the attendance at the NXT shows in the same way that they do with Raw and SmackDown. And I think that is because NXT, it doesn't seem worth, when you compare them to Raw and SmackDown's figures, NXT inevitably takes part in smaller venues.
It does.
It's just televised. That's all it really boils down to. So I don't think we hear a lot about attendance apart from maybe the PLEs that NXT do. So be interesting to watch Judgment to see if they talk about attendance figures with that one.
Vengeance.
We'll soon see. Yeah.
Judgment.
You knew what I meant.
NXT pay-per-view coming live soon. Maybe.
Look, you knew what I meant. It's been a long day, all right? Yeah, Bayley came out to, well, basically address the situation developing between her and Roxanne Perez, former NXT Women's Champion. And
I can't wait. They're going to fight again soon. They're going to fight hard. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, 100%. It's building into a feud. It didn't look like it was going to at one point. It looked like it might have just been a bit of a flash in the pan, but now that Bayley started making regular appearances at NXT, and Roxanne Perez is making regular appearances on the main roster shows as well, it's certainly building into something which I think we may see at the PLE event. I think this could be one of the matches on the card.
Here's to hoping. I'll give it that much.
But yeah, Bayley comes out, calls Perez out for being entitled and basically saying that she's immature.
The word idiot at the moment, which is really frustrating me because there's so many other words. And I know, like we said this on the Raw episode, they're just kind of testing the waters to see what they can get away with. But it just reminds me of Chris Jericho. You're an idiot. You just made the list.
Yeah. I love that. You just made the list. But yeah, especially with NXT still being broadcast on the CW in the States, it's a case that I think they've got to be really careful with what sort of language they use, especially on NXT. I think you see the odd slip of a swear word in with SmackDown and Raw. I don't think they're just going to come out and go, oh, fuck this, fuck that, fuck that. Yeah, it's not going to be like WWE with Tourette's. It's going to be a bit more structured than that.
You imagine if Stone Cold had been around, if they'd have done that sort of thing. Gonna have a shot of beer. Fuck. 2 beers. Fuck. 3 beers. Fuck.
Yeah, he wouldn't have given a fuck, basically. He'd have drunk it instead. But we have during this promo, we have somebody unexpected come out and actually interrupt Bayley, but for all the right reasons. And this was the current NXT Women's Champion, Julia.
And she came out and basically said that she had a lot of respect for Bayley, and that she wanted to kind of hold the title in the same way that Bayley did, with quite a lot of honor and love. For someone like a current champion to be telling you as a former champion, I want to kind of be like you with this title. That's nice to see. Bayley's been the forefront of the women's division for a long, long time. So we're actually starting to see guys now that were sort of young kids watching wrestling that are now jumping into the ring and going, oh shit, I wasn't watching this person as a teenager, and now I'm getting to wrestle them. So for some of these guys, it's going to be insane.
Yeah, I mean, Bayley was one of the original four horsewomen of the women's division renaissance that went on, has been going on for the last few years. It's why we're seeing a lot more female-based matches on the card than we did sort of out of the Attitude Era and into the PG era. It's even early days of the PG era, we were still seeing women's wrestling not really being given much of a go. And then we had the Four Horsewomen come along, who really sort of took WWE to task to say, look, it's the 21st century. We need to be given an equal shake of the stick at it. And the
we're
women
more
have
than
taken
just a
that
bra
and
and panties
run with
division.
Although, not going to lie, I do miss some of the bra and panties matches, but it's not appropriate for this for the modern era, unfortunately.
It's not.
But yeah, Bayley and Julia are discussing title prestige and everything, all that comes along with that. And they're then interrupted by not just Roxanne Perez, which would be a rather sort of what's the word, predictable sort of person to come out and.
Well, yeah, she brought Cora Jade with her as well, which was not really something I would have expected. But
so I've got a feeling that Cora Jade, in her contract, has got so many appearances. She's got to make so many appearances to be able to make her contract. And the only reason I say this is because she seems to crop up in the oddest of places. She realistically had no reason to be out there with Roxanne Perez other than to add an extra body to an already stacked ring with Julia and Bayley in it. So she was there as moral support, but Cora Jade is popping up a hell of a lot because she's been in every NXT broadcast we've had. And she also made, I believe, an appearance at TNA Genesis that's just gone by. Again, still haven't watched it. I will get round to it at some point. But
I put in my notes with this that the way they were cutting this, it felt like they were going to tee off for a tag event. And I was sat there kind of hoping, I really hope they don't do this. And if they do, they've kind of got to use it as a squash for Bayley and Julia, surely, just to make them look. I mean, Julia doesn't need to look strong. She's the NXT champion. Bayley doesn't really need to look that too strong either, but I can't see why they'd push that sort of angle if they were going to do anything useful with it.
No, and realistically, we know now that they weren't pushing that angle, at least at the moment, doesn't appear to be being pushed. But the boos that Perez and Jade came out to were deafening to a certain extent. They were drowning Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez completely out. This crowd was 100% on the side of Bayley and the NXT Women's Champion. It was hilarious to a point. But this promo sort of ends. This was a very sort of confusing promo, to say the least. But Yeah, Julia and Bailey throw the first punch in what turns into a bit of an arena brawl, really, that has to be broken up by WWE officials, referees, security. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the background in the back came out to try and split those four up. We
Yes,
then
we
once
went to the
once the
backstage section when it had quietened down a little bit. We had a conversation with Kalani and Jada backstage, and then they bust out fighting, and everywhere you look, there is just a brawl, and the security's kind of stood there going, "What the fuck are we doing here?" But none of the other
yeah
members of the roster that I noticed got involved. No one, none of the other wrestlers were trying to split anyone up. They were all in the cantina.
yeah I think they were, but yeah, we had Jada Parker, who was watching the action unfold in the ring, seemed really buzzed at the fact that Bailey had mentioned her name. Obviously, Bailey being originally NXT, she's a huge name in that promotion. Somebody that a lot of the talent look up to. And then we've got Kalani Jordan points out that her name was actually mentioned before Jada's, which is when Jada just turns into a bit of a bitter bitch. She arguments ensue, and then you've got, of all people, Carmen Petrovic, who is, I mean, bless her, she's on cloud nine. She is the cat that got the cream, so to speak. The cream being Ashante Adonis last week, again during this pan away promo.
See, we said at the time
And
we felt that promo was really unneeded, but now we've got a week into it, and it has kind of it's concreted in a few cracks to some of the questions you're asking, but it hasn't really given us a huge sort of overall
it,
run to it.
it's just the format that we had with that promo was just really unique. It's not something we've seen in WWE previously. So, I mean, if it's something they're going to continue to use, happy days. If it seems to leave you with a lot of questions when you first see it, and then they fill in the blanks later, which I'm not
Not
mad at.
opposed to.
It just didn't seem to make sense at the time. But
I think
yeah,
because we
this
haven't watched a lot of NXT, maybe because we've not watched a huge amount, we've missed that they do things slightly differently. So we may just be
yeah
used to setting it up in the way they would set up Raw or SmackDown, where it is, it's its own brand, and they're trying something else out that possibly could work, possibly could not.
Yeah, I think it's very situational. If they're trying to tie a lot of storylines together, it's possible that that's how they're going to do it. In fact, something they may resort to doing in future. But we went from locker room back to in ring, where the action just kicked off again between Perez, Jade, Bailey, and Julia. Um,
It was
it just looked like
relentless, absolute carnage.
complete chaos.
The only
Absolute
thing
chaos.
that could have made it slightly more fun to watch would have been if someone had introduced a weapon of some kind. But I don't know. I like
I
seeing
don't
people
think there
being
was
hit with
any.
a steel chair.
I was going to say, I think that's more of a personal want than anything that could be sort of folded into the story. It may have just come across as unnecessary to a certain degree if they'd have gone to that extent. But I mean, even the NXT GM made a brief cameo in this, where she was trying to sort of talk sense into Perez and Jade next, sort of in, I don't even know if you could call it the gorilla position. I don't think NXT have a gorilla position, um, which for people that are quite new to the intricacies of how backstage works within WWE, gorilla position is the position that sits just behind where the entranceway is, generally manned by the head of the company, and they basically sit there with monitors and watch the show from backstage, call the shots from there. So yeah,
I'm glad
it
you
just
explained that because Mide had a complete brain fart and was sat there going, I'm sure you can't really say
Well, if I can offer any knowledge at any point, I will most definitely do that. Now that sort of blended. The fighting continued, but blends quite seamlessly into the second match because at the end of that little promo segment, we see Dion Lennox coming out to the ring,
trying to dodge all these fighting women.
Yeah, pretty much. While I'm thinking about it, actually, during the in-ring segment for the Bayley promo, it was the all male ref team that I actually felt sorry for throughout that entire thing, because there's no way that all four of those blokes were like, yeah, no, we've got to split this up. I'm pretty sure at least one of them was thought, would it be the worst thing in the world if we just let them do it?
I mean, even a crowd were just chanting, "Let them fight." So, everyone wanted to see it.
This is it. But match 2 was a men's singles match between Dion Lennox and Wes Lee, accompanied to the ring by Tyson DuPont and Tyreek Igwe.
Can you even call this a match? I mean,
it was
a squash match. Let's be honest.
It was. I mean, Lennox comes out swinging, tries to put as much into it as he possibly can. It has been alluded to within promos this week and last that Lennox is still very new to the industry. He's not got a lot of experience under his belt, but he's got a hell of a lot of enthusiasm. And yeah, it was a squash match. Wes Lee squashed the hell out of him, but this wasn't designed, at least, to get Lennox over in that way. He was, at least initially, used as just a bit of a prop, really. But yeah, it was a well-placed knee from Lee that helped him gain control in the match. Helped him initially gain control in the match, and yeah, Lee just seems to take Lennox out with a succession of kicks, which I'd almost say borders on disrespectful to Lennox. I mean, be as inexperienced as you want, but at least make it a convincing loss.
Yeah,
it just didn't feel. It didn't feel like they'd put a lot of effort into the actual fight. They could have played that out a little bit better. It could have had a bit more to it. I feel like Lennox took one hell of a dive. I mean, any other fight in sport, and we'd have been calling people out for taking a dive on that one, realistically.
It kind of felt to me like they were pulled behind backstage, gone, right, guys, you've got 5 to 10 minutes. This is what's going to happen. Just go and do something, waste some time. And that's pretty much what it was. While they got ready for the next match, which is what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, but this is where it sort of builds into something that might be worthwhile. So once the match is over and Wes Lee has his hand raised, Lee then immediately goes to cut a promo, basically calling out Trick Williams for slapping him like a bitch.
He is a bitch.
And
you can squash a rookie like that, you're still a bitch.
And I think Trick Williams comes out and basically said, I mean, the guy takes out 2 opponents and confirms a match for next week with Wes Lee. But the little nod that I don't think is going to get as much airtime as we think it will, at least to begin with, is the shoulder bump that Williams gives on his way out of the arena, and shoulder bumps Lennox, who seems to not take that very well at all. Like, the look on that guy's face is like somebody ate his birthday cake in front of him and told him to like it.
Yeah, someone's just pissed on his cornflakes and he's still got to eat that bowl.
Oh, 100%. But yeah, I mean, going from there, we had
talking about
VT
people
promo.
who think they've had their cornflakes pissed in.
Yeah. So we had a VT promo recapping the history between Lexis King. Or no, it was sort of a recap of Lexis King, essentially, who seemed to have come into NXT in a less conventional fashion, whereas most of the professional wrestlers in his class that came in were sort of very well put together and everything along those lines. Is that Lexis King just seems to have picked up a bit of the what's the word I'm looking for, the
Chip off the
legacy
old
that
block.
the legacy that his father left behind, being Brian Pillman.
Which is funny considering he's trying to do the whole, I'm not like my dad. I'm completely different. He's not. He's just like his old man.
He is trying to be better, though.
Oh, yeah.
Get credit given where credit's due. But yeah, basically we had from when Lexis King, we had a VT recap of when Lexis King came into WWE, came into NXT, to pretty much what happened during the Heritage Cup, and the conversation with Ava, where a Heritage Cup rematch was asked for by not Charlie Dempsey. Charlie Dempsey's female compatriot, who is part of the stable he's a part of, which I did have written down and I can't quite remember. I know it's CSC or CSCS. I'm not entirely sure, and I can't remember what it all stands for. It'll come to me later on. But yes, this VT promo basically blends into match 3, which is the second title defense on the card this evening. And this was for the NXT Heritage Cup. And this was with Charlie Dempsey versus Lexis King, who is the reigning defending Heritage Cup champion. And this one was slated to take place under Heritage Cup rules.
Now, I made a note here that I wanted to go back and have a look to see what those were.
Now, I did the research and found out what Heritage Cup rules are. So, Heritage Cup rules, it's basically a 2 out of 3 falls match. So the entire match is 3 falls long. And it's whoever gains the majority wins the match overall. But the match itself is broken down into 6 3-minute rounds with sort of 20 to 30 second breaks between each round. Falls can be won by pinfall, submission, or count out.
Right.
So if an opponent is counted out, it's not champion's advantage. Their opponent will gain the point for that round. And any falls end a round. So if you're in the middle of the first round, 2 minutes in, gain a pinfall, that's that round over, even though there would be another minute left on the clock. That round ends, we're going straight into a break period, and then they start the next round from there. And that's Heritage Cup rules.
That was pretty interesting. I just had to have a little Google because I was interested, obviously, because Lexis King is the son of Brian Pillman, and Charlie Dempsey is the son of British wrestler William Regal. I was looking to see if their dads ever matched, and apparently Brian Pillman and William Regal wrestled to a time limit draw at Spring Stampede in 1994 for the WCW World Television Championship, which Regal was currently holding at the time.
Yeah, so there's not a terribly storied history between Regal and Pillman. Pillman's history and what Pillman is known for is more to do with how he sort of carried himself and behaved, not just in the ring but outside of it as well. I haven't done enough research into Brian Pillman and can't recall enough off the top of my head to tell you sort of the basic detail about it. And plus, I think if I did, it'd be a podcast episode in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that is something that anybody would like to hear about, I'm more than happy to go away, do the research, and record a podcast episode around it. But you'll have to let us know. But
I do a bit
moving
of trivia
on.
for us.
Oh, 100%. I'll quite happily do the research. I've got no issue with that. But yeah, obviously the big controversy with the Heritage Cup changing hands from Charlie Dempsey to Lexis King was an inadvertent headshot.
I think that was classed as a double kill.
Double headshot potentially, but yeah. So basically, Charlie Dempsey's championship reign was ended by an inadvertent headbutt to the plums, and yeah, that his match sort of spiraled out of control from there, and we did almost have a repeat.
They did pay homage to the old head to the plums, didn't they? Oh, they lined it up, and Charlie Dempsey covered himself up like, "I don't think so, not today, my good sir."
No, this is it, and I mean, these two obviously know each other really well. They've wrestled plenty of times in the past, so they know each other's move sets. Whereas sort of Lexis King is more of a strike high flying style wrestler. You've got Charlie Dempsey takes after his dad who trained him, and is more of a ground and pound submission technical wrestler. So they are two very sort of opposing styles. And I mean, if we went based purely on style, Charlie Dempsey holds the advantage, because if he can ground Lexis King, that's it. Lexis King hasn't got a leg to stand on normally. But first round passes without incident. You could almost call it a feeling out process if you wanted to go that deep. But it's Lexis King that gains the first fall in round 2 by pinfall, I believe.
It was, yes. So I've got a few different notes here. I'm just going to try and scroll back through. So yeah, you got the first fall in round 2 with a roll-up reversal. So he reversed a move into a roll-up and got the shoulders down for the 3 count. And then Charlie Dempsey won round 3 with a pinfall after using the ropes to take Lexis King off a chokehold that he had him held in. Now, I believe it was the chicken wing crossface that he was using at the time, but I could be wrong.
This seems to have been a bit of a favourite move of Dempsey, and it's not a hold we see on a very regular basis. So I have to assume that this is something that Regal took great pride in teaching his offspring how to do this particular hold, and I mean, he seems to carry it out to quite a bit of proficiency. But one of the big recurring themes in this matchup was so each in very much the same fashion as a boxing match, between the rounds, obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, they have like 20 to 30 seconds to freshen themselves up, give themselves a bit of a pep talk, and then go into the next round of the fight.
Ice bucket they kept focusing on, or more the item in the ice bucket they kept focusing on in Lexis King's corner.
The good old brass knucks.
Yeah. Gotta love a set of brass knucks.
It's possible that, I mean, we saw in the VT recap that William Regal has tried to pass Lexis King brass knucks in the past to try and win matches, and it's possible that's how they made their way in there. Even though I know William Regal isn't currently signed to a NXT to any form of NXT contract, to the best of my knowledge, but one way or another, brass knucks made their way into King's ice bucket, and he was very tempted on several occasions to use those same brass knuckles.
He did take them out of the bucket at one point, didn't he? In the middle of the round break, and then he kind of thought against it and put them back, but you can see he was definitely thinking about going, you know what, fuck it, I'll use them. But no, he definitely decided against it. Thankfully, he could have caused a lot of damage with those brass knuckles.
I mean, he didn't exactly get away with a clean slate, so to speak, as far as the match goes, because Lexis King does walk out of there with a victory, retaining the Heritage Cup Championship
after another incident with Charlie Dempsey's plums. I'm starting to think that they've got a love connection going on here. There's a lot of touchy, feely.
Well, the first time it was accidental, and
that
you could see that it was accidental. But the one in this match, that was purposefully done. I mean, technically speaking, a great match from the two of them. It was a real clinic of technical wrestling and a very different format to anything that we've seen for quite a while. It's not very often we see a 2 out of 3 falls match in WWE at all. But the fact that they've made it into its very own championship is quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it certainly is, and it gives us an opportunity to see some of the match titles that we wouldn't necessarily see a lot of. And yeah, when we get tournaments like that, it makes everything a little bit more fresh and a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, this is it. It just goes to show that WWE have not completely given up being original and just sticking a bunch of superstars in the ring and saying, "Yeah, fucking have at it." But yeah, so we've had two title matches so far. Both of them have retained, so no titles have changed hands at this point. But moving away from the action, we went to a backstage promo where the very first thing on the docket was that an announcement was made that Brooks Jensen and Nico Vance take on Stax and Luca Crucifino of the family later on this same card.
Yeah, no, that was definitely, once that was announced, it was something I was kind of looking forward to. Again, this NXT sort of product itself has been it's kind of been growing on me slowly. You get to when we first started watching it, because I didn't know who everyone was and what was going on. It was very much like we both said it was very difficult to watch. We're now 3 weeks in. We've learned a little bit more, been able to do some research and kind of catch up with what's been on. And yeah, no, some of these little bits are really kind of growing on me, especially this Tony D'Angelo and the D'Angelo family.
I mean, it still has its moments where it's difficult to watch, but again, we're still being introduced to a lot of the roster, and yeah, it does get difficult in places, and there are parts of that this week where I found it particularly difficult, where it takes me out, where I've got no clue who any of these people are. But we'll get to that. The other bit of this backstage promo was a bit of a promo with Stephanie Baker, the winner of a tournament on the first NXT in the Netflix era, I believe, for a women's United States Championship, a women's NXT US championship opportunity, which seems to have been sort of stolen right from under her by Shotzi, essentially. But both of them have legitimate claims, as we've discussed in previous episodes.
Yeah.
So yeah, but once we'd heard about the announcement of Jensen and Nico versus Stax and Crucifino, later in the night, we also had a bit of a promo from Stephanie Baker, who seems to have not necessarily lost out on the opportunity, but has had to have her opportunity delayed due to Shotzi having an equally valid on the number one contendership for the women's US NXT Championship, and yeah, she just feels a bit forgotten, I think, and that was sort of re-establishing herself as continuing to be relevant in this situation, and that was sort of the extent of that little promo. It wasn't much of anything, if truth be told.
I think if I was Ava personally with this, I'd just make it a triple threat match. stick the champion in with Shotzi and with Stephanie Baker and just, make it a no DQ match and crack in.
If I remember correctly, I believe Shotzi has her opportunity next week on NXT.
What, in Atlanta?
Yes.
Cool. Well, that gives you a damn good reason to watch the NXT in Atlanta then, or tune into our podcast next week.
Precisely. So, where did we go from there, Rich?
My notes from there say that we ended up with a Cartman Petrovic and Jada Parker intro, which was closely followed up by a Royal Rumble VT and a backstage promo / conversation with Andre Chase, Hank Walker, and Tank Ledger.
I believe there was also a backstage promo in there for with like a VT sort of promo with Naomi and Bianca Belair, the current women's tag team champions.
Talking about their match next week in Atlanta with Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson.
Yeah, so they had a promo which didn't really, again, sort of amount to anything other than the fact that we're here, we're having a match, and no, we're not really worried about the competition.
Which is what everyone seems to be saying at the moment. No one seems to be worried about the competition, and these title defenses are, well, they're being retained. So I can see for some of them they've got a reason not to be.
It seems a bit of a formality almost, but yeah, we will pick up with match 4 on the card, or match 4 as I've got it down, which was a women's singles match between Carmen Petrovic, accompanied to the ring by Ashante Adonis, versus Jada Parker. This sort of boiled over from a backstage promo we saw right at the top of the show this evening, and not tremendously inspiring match.
No.
Sort of Parker showing some creative offense. I think there was some resourceful use of her surroundings within her offense during this match, or at least that was the note that I made. Jada Parker seems to have sort of come out with a bad attitude, and we had an interference during the match from Kalani Jordan.
She popped a distraction, which meant that she distracted Jada Parker, so Carmen Petrovic could kind of roll her up. I had this conversation with you a few weeks ago about roll-up pins and roll-up victories. They are so cheap and lazy, it's unreal. But I think for this one, I'm going to allow it to go because it ended what was the worst match of the night for me. It was about time. These guys just needed to clear the ring and get ready for what was next.
Yeah, so not a tremendous, not a tremendously inspiring match as such. I mean, I've spoken before about Kalani Jordan, that I just find her very, very dull to watch, and there's just nothing that sort of inspires me to like or dislike her. I just find her very boring. And again, she seems to be, NXT seem to be trying to find the right fit for her. She's again appeared in quite a number of different angles over the last few weeks, and without any sort of real direction, as if she's got to be there to fill a space. And this is how they've chosen to use her in this particular instance. I mean, this could be building towards a feud between Jordan and Parker in the future, but yeah, it felt like a very unnecessary match. I will pick up on a backstage promo you referenced just a moment ago, however, because it was during the entrance for match 4, which was the Hank and Tank and Andre Chase promo.
Yeah.
Now, this sort of started the line for me where I started not really knowing who anybody was. So Andre Chase, Hank Walker, Tank Ledger, I have no clue who they are before this point.
Nope, I didn't either.
And yeah, so it took this entire promo with how it sort of was weaved together looked like another pan away, potentially another pan away promo, which frustrated me a little bit. It didn't turn out to be quite like that, but it did give me a little bit more to go on as to who these characters were and things like that. So Hank and Tank talk about Chase walking out on them a few weeks ago, and Chase basically retorts with saying, "Well, if you're not happy, split up, go for a singles run, or form another tag team, or whatever you want to do. Just not really that fussed."
Right, which is pretty much my entire attitude to this entire promo. Just do what you've got to do. I'm not really that fussed. Just crack on.
So it was interesting, the next part, because again, this was what gave me a little bit more backstory. I had to go away and do a bit of the research for it, but yeah. So Andre Chase walks away from this interaction. The camera follows him around to where he's addressed by another relatively unknown superstar, to me at least, Cale Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
But the real interesting point was what was playing in the background. So you had about half a dozen superstars sat watching something on TV, where you'd quite clearly got Andre Chase in some sort of a coaching role or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Now,
he reminded that section reminded me of those TV shows in America with the cultist leader priest guys that are always ranting and raving, the evangelists. That's pretty much what that came across as.
It's interesting that you say that. So, Chase seems a little bit adrift at the moment, based on what I've been able to research, and he seems to be a bit lost after the closure of Chase U, or University Chase, which was a faction that he'd established with himself as the dean of this university, where he was giving an education, I'm assuming some kind of wrestling education, to a number of different superstars that fell within that faction. This entire faction fell apart, or was disassembled, back on November 19th episode of NXT, which is available on Netflix as it stands, I believe. And it was a match between Ridge Holland and Andre Chase, which Chase ended up losing, resulting in that faction being disbanded. I'm not really sure of what the backstory that involved Ridge Holland in it, but that was about as much as I was willing to look into it, which gave me enough context to put all of that in some sort of semi-credible limelight. So there is something building there. It's just not we could be seeing a return of Chase U, especially as Cale Dixon seems to think that or he gave an impression that he thinks that there's a way of overturning the decision that Chase U had to be disbanded, potentially. So this may be something that builds over a number of weeks, which will be interesting to watch, in my view.
Well, we'll have to see how that pans out.
Yeah, so we went from there to the ladies' locker room, and Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson basically talking up the hype, talking about the hype promo for their match next week versus Naomi and Bianca. And this was all a sort of very pep talky, rah-rah, sort of very American pep rally sort of promo to me. Is you've got Lash Legend, Jakara Jackson bathing in the glow of the fact that they've got an opportunity to take these titles and bring them to NXT, and sort of pointing out to the likes of Sol Ruka and Zaraya that if they So Sol Ruka, Zarea, Gigi Dolin, and Tatum Paxley, that this could be something that could benefit everybody, because if they bring these titles back to NXT, then all of these NXT superstars basically get a crack at these titles, which could be an interesting way that Naomi and Bianca lose their tag straps. It could be that it goes to NXT, adding another title to the NXT roster, maybe.
Possibly.
Because we have seen some very minor cracks starting to show in Naomi and Bianca recently, and we have discussed this on previous episodes of the podcast spanning back, where we've seen inadvertent hair shots from Bianca to Naomi in matches
I was going to bring that up, actually.
It's all sort of starting to feed in together a little bit, or at least that's how I'm starting to see how this might end.
It might not be too far away. It could be a Mania job. It could be between now and Mania. It could play out.
Yeah, this is it. But yeah, that was very much the end of that promo, and I believe we went from there into match 5. Unless I know your notes have a tendency to be a little bit more of a play-by-play as to what's included within the episode. Have I missed anything here?
So we went into a backstage promo with, which is basically just a hype event for Eddie Thorpe and the Oberfemi main event, which then pushed through into the Brooks Jensen and Nico Vance versus the other members of the D'Angelo family, whose names I didn't pick up. I will apologise. Brooks Jensen and Nico Vance came out with Sean Spears, as we said earlier, formerly known as Ty Dillinger.
Yep. And then we had Stacks and Crucifino coming out with Rizzo, basically the D'Angelo family, minus D'Angelo himself. Yeah. But the commentary on this for this match did state that he had just had a rather grueling match himself at the beginning of the card. He could be elsewhere having taking a breather,
receiving some medical treatment, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very physical matchup, very chaotic and fast paced.
Yeah, him and Rich Holland went to war for a little while, so he's definitely going to be feeling a bit rough. But you'd expect him to be able to let the underboss deal with what needed to be dealt with.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they referred to, I'm not sure if it was Stacks or Crucifino, which one it was, as who it is that is referred to as the underboss. Again, anybody knows, drop us a message drop us a message in through all the normal channels for it. But again, this match, tag team match, I put down, it was physical, it was chaotic, it was fast paced, there was a lot of urgency behind it, which I'm not mad at.
As well, everyone came in. It just started off from the bell didn't even ring, and they were fighting. There was all sorts of action going off here, there, and everywhere. You didn't really know where to look to who was going to have the better of the two matchups out of the four guys in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, Nico and Brooks did eventually pick up a rather sort of brutal victory over Stacks and Crucifino, which, sort of wrapped that match up, but not a tremendously inspiring match as it goes. But one of those things, I think.
I think we've said a lot of these matches haven't necessarily had a lot to them. They've all been pretty, they've not had a lot of padding. It's been, what needs to be done has been done quite quickly, which kind of makes me feel maybe they could get away with dropping a match every week and just making the ones they've got slightly more padded, if you get me.
So, whereas in last week, the week before, NXT was a 5-match card. interspersed with promos, VTs, and interviews, sort of thing. This is a breakaway where they did 6 matches to the card, 3 of them being championship matches. And yeah, I feel like they definitely could have done with losing at least one of these matches from the card altogether, and possibly saving the money on the appearances of those particular superstars. But again, I think this could all come down to a contract deal, that they've all got to have a certain amount of experiences within set periods of time to be able to maintain their contract moving forward. Or at least that. It's the only thing that I can think of as to why they keep sort of booking these throwaway matches. Or maybe these throwaway matches will make sense next week when we develop those storylines a little bit more. Who knows?
We'll find out after Atlanta if we are needing to fill in any gaps in. Now, I'm not sure what you've got on this one, but I did put down that Vance finished this one with quite a powerful lariat, and picked up the 3 count. But I didn't really pull a lot of notes out of this match.
No,
I'm not sure if it was because I was too engrossed in the match, or if it was because there just wasn't a lot to necessarily discuss at the end of it.
For me, it was because it was quite chaotic. I was watching it during the day after it aired, and if I watch something during the day, I've got to have it finished by a certain time, because chances are I've got to go. If I'm there during the day, I've got to go out and do school run at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't get back here until sometimes 9:30, 10 o'clock. So, and with NXT especially, I have to keep pausing, rewinding, rewatching to make sure that I absorb everything that's going on. So my notes for this match were very limited to physical, chaotic, and a brutal victory essentially, because for me to have sat there and absorbed all the detail, I'd have had to have gone back and rewatched individual segments of that match multiple times for them to make sense.
Yeah, neither of us have got the time to be able to get away with doing that at the moment.
I think once we're a little bit more established within NXT brands, and we know who a lot of these wrestlers are, we won't need to necessarily go back and rewatch and things like that. It'll flow a little bit better for us. But this is where I think our lack of NXT experience is sort of a bit of a detriment to us. But we'll push on regardless. Move past that match into a backstage interview with Fraxium, who have had quite a busy week since last we saw them.
They made an appearance at Genesis. I do not know if they made an in-ring appearance or if it was just an in-the-crowd appearance, but I am aware they made an appearance.
So, having not watched Genesis, I don't know the specific detail, but I believe it was an in-ring. It was an in-ring appearance at Genesis, and they are also set to go on a title defense for the NXT Men's Tag Team Championships on TNA this week. So they are heading to, I believe it's still called the Impact Zone. So they are heading to the Impact Zone this week for a title defense with, I believe that the team they're defending against is called the Rascals, but that's about as much as I know.
I'm not someone who consumes a lot of TNA product, unless it is a cheeky little reel on Facebook of that man, Joe Hendry. I don't really pay too much attention.
And I haven't consumed TNA content in about 4 or 5 years. It's been a long time. I used to watch it way back when, but not as much anymore. But this promo was more so, I think, to push an angle we saw last week, which was Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura. That they're still not being given the chance that they feel that they were owed or promised. Last week they lost out to OTM. This week they're not getting a title shot because apparently TNA got dibs over them. Basically, they came out accusing Fraxium of dodging the challenge, and Fraxium hit them back, saying, "Well, do they really deserve it? Who have you beaten to get that shot, to deserve that shot, sort of thing?"
No
And I
one
mean,
really.
we haven't seen them in any sort of match since the Netflix era, and I can't imagine that there's been a great many matches for them since then. But this promo breaks down when OTM basically come out and swing for the fences with Inamura and Briggs, and yeah, that breaks down really rather quickly, and we move on. Another backstage promo, which starts with an
Ethan
incensed.
Page.
No,
No.
no, you're in a different spot to me because this was another almost pan away promo. We started off with a backstage promo with an incensed Dion Lennox crashing around and breaking shit backstage.
I remember him
Obviously,
throwing the ladder around, but I can't remember. Yeah,
it wasn't a tremendously long
too
appearance
memorable.
for him. It wasn't a tremendously long appearance for Dion Lennox, and it sort of skipped away, panned from Dion Lennox, who crashed through backstage, obviously not happy with the way his match went, the shoulder bump. I think there is going to be some massive fallout from that young man in the weeks to follow. But the big story here was we panned to the newly retained Tony D'Angelo, the men's United States NXT champion, and Izzy Dame, speculating that someone has a crush on her. I've speculated maybe Sean Spears, as he does seem to be spending a lot of time around the family and Izzy Dame and all of these bits and pieces. But this was a short-lived conversation. I feel like we came in just at the end. There's some detail that we didn't get.
Sure, we'll get that detail at a later date, though. But it was the fact that the rest of the D'Angelo family were like, what the fuck are you? What were you doing? And he was just there like, Izzy wouldn't shut up, and I just kind of had to keep listening to her talk. He was very dismissive of what Izzy was trying to say.
Yeah, very much so. It's he very much feels, or I get the impression he very much feels that he's above the rest of the family. I mean, that is the dynamic that they've set. That he does sit at top dog status, but doesn't really seem to concern himself with anyone who's operating beneath him. And yeah, basically saying that, basically admitting to the rest of his team, "Oh yeah, no, I can't always be there, but I expect you to be there for me. That's the way this works."
Well, yeah, he's not a powerful champion if he hasn't got his homies around to help him out, though, is he?
No, this is it. But should a champion really need a team of people around him to maintain his championship? I've speculated on many occasion where we have a heel champ that feels he needs a faction or a stable or a tag team around him to be able to maintain his dominance. Are they really championship material?
Well, no. But
we digress. This next bit I've got down as a VT recap of Ethan Page's actions last week, where he has put another superstar on the injured list. This time being wrestler's last name Chen, who Paul Bloat ends up with probably a shattered ankle or
broken foot of some kind. Yeah, using the steel steps last week to basically just obliterate that lower limb. And then and it's not the first time he's done it. He hurt Cedric Alexander's hand. He bust Javon's jaw.
Yeah.
So he's been on a spree of injuring some people, and obviously last week Javon went running in to help out another wrestler that was getting in trouble with Ethan Page, and he took a one shot to the face. He got punched on that broken jaw right at the chin, and that dropped him back to the mat where he pretty much, that was the last place we saw him.
Yeah, and this was basically Ethan Page's way of saying, look, don't come back until you're ready, because if you come back again, you're not going to have a jaw left to be able to wire together.
Pretty much, and there's only so many times you can smash that into pieces before you run out of options.
Really pushing the unhinged angle with Ethan Page. He seems to have really gone off a deep end here. And I mean, I suppose every brand has one now. They've all got someone that's gone off the deep end, but Ethan Page seems on a completely different level to Kevin Owens and Drew McIntyre on Raw and SmackDown, respectively. But this feeds directly into a promo in the GM's office with Ava and Javon Evans discussing the VT that was played just moments before.
Javon Evans, bless him, trying to discuss it with Ava, but he saw through gritted teeth with that wired jaw put in place. I'll tell you, that's not a comfortable thing to have done either. So the fact that he's even wanting to try and have a match with a wired jaw is ballsy, but fair play to Ava for saying that you're not being medically cleared. You're not going to be for a while. It's not happening. Not on my Nelly. Off you go, son.
Well, Ava took a very diplomatic approach to it. She was very sympathetic for Javon, but sort of basically told him in the same breath, mate, it's your own fault.
Pretty much.
You went in there knowing you were injured. He took full advantage of that injury in a fight, which, I mean, anybody that's ever been in a fight, which is pretty much everybody, it's a case that you know that if you know that your opponent has a weakness, you're going to capitalize on that weakness to make sure you walk out with a dub. It's
right, you are.
It's survival of the fittest. It's the oldest law, law of the jungle. So, yeah, but it's funny you should mention Cedric Alexander, as you did a few moments ago, because Javon Evans isn't cleared for competition.
But Cedric Alexander
is. And he has been set for a match confirmed for next week in Atlanta, which will be Ethan Page. Ethan Page versus Cedric Alexander.
Which then leads us into another backstage segment with A-Town Down Under showed up.
So this was a continuation of the same promo as it goes. It's Cedric Alexander and Javon Evans leave. A-Town Down Under come in to talk to Ava ahead of an appearance that they are making in Atlanta next week.
For the Grayson Waller effect.
Yeah, basically setting up the fact that the Grayson Waller effect talk show segment will be featuring the winner of the NXT Championship match that is set for basically the
main event
last section of the last section of the episode of NXT, the last section of our podcast today.
That was Obafemi and Eddie Thorpe for the NXT World Championship.
Yes, so Obafemi being his first ever
title defense.
And I'm not going to lie, I was actually really surprised by this match. I mean, after the display that Obafemi put on to win the title, it was actually quite surprising to see that Eddie Thorpe was the one that was in control for a lot of this match, or at least that's how I viewed it. It was Obafemi, apart from towards the end, wasn't really allowed to build up much of a head of steam, and in fact, it seems as though
it shows that with Obafemi, if you allow him to have time to build up and start sort of getting momentum, you're in trouble. But if you can stop him from building that momentum which is what Eddie Thorpe did at the start of this match. Basically, did for the first 3/4 of it. To be fair, it really does pay, advantage to you in the long run. Yes, you might tire yourself out a little bit trying to kind of keep him down and wear him out, but once you've got him in a position, he looks vulnerable. He didn't look as strong as he did when he won it at all.
No, he didn't. This was a different side to Obafemi than we've seen previously. I mean, he seemed very easily distracted. I mean, A-Town Down Under seemed to have premium seats to this fight, being in some kind of raised platform above the ring to be able to view this match, and very much sort of making their presence known. But Thorpe seemed to stay sort of laser focused. Regardless of that, Thorpe still does not walk out of this with a victory. It seems that he managed to let Obafemi gain a little bit too much space, and after
he did take a beating in the process there. I mean, I've got down here that Obafemi at one point I think he caught him in a crossbody attempt. It just threw him across the ring like he was a cigarette butt. Just flicked him across. It was horrific. He got hit with a pretty nasty choke slam at some point as well. Obafemi can use that and use it well. It was a really effective move for him. I know he's a big guy, and Eddie Thorpe's not as big and powerful, but it's nice to see a good old choke slam get used occasionally and used to a decent quality as well. Considering we're used to seeing guys like sort of Kane and Undertaker slam these people around, to be able to see someone else that wouldn't actually look kind of out of miss in like a Vince McMahon style locker room with the big muscly guys that he likes. He would have fitted in really well there. So to hit that move was beautiful.
Yeah, this is it. But as I've alluded to, Obafemi retains, which means we have no titles changing hands at this week's NXT. But Obafemi picks up the win and retains, and I've just put down in my notes, what a challenge from Thorpe. I mean, he's well and truly cemented that he is a real contender for any title he wants to put his mind to.
He may not have picked up a dub, but it definitely didn't do him any harm.
No, definitely
not. It shows he's definitely a good workhorse, and we'll see him picking up gold at some point in the next few months, I'm sure. Which title we see him holding, I wouldn't like to try and guess, but we will definitely see him holding something.
No, because the closing moments of this of the show were all too telling as to who Obafemi's next opponent is most likely to be, as seemingly out of nowhere after the match, you've got Obafemi seeming to have some kind of altercation with A-Town Down Under.
They're having a bit of a mouthing session, aren't they? And then Trick Williams just pops up out of nowhere,
with a very determined look on his face. So I think going into the next Premium Live event, we may see a rematch for that NXT World Championship.
I'm going to say, though, how badly does Eddie Thorpe get treated by Trick Williams here? The disrespect in getting dropped like that was just fucked him right up.
100%.
How many times 100%. Has that lad been beaten up, concussed, and downright done dirty in the last few weeks? Poor Eddie Thorpe.
Yeah, you have sort of got to feel sorry for him at this point, because as we've said just now, he has proven himself in this match that he is not an incapable wrestler. He is not a work shy person at all, because he really took Obafemi to task this week and just was seriously unlucky that he didn't manage to walk out with some championship gold round his waist.
He did. Right. Well, I think this for me has been the end of it. I haven't got much else that I'd want to throw in there. I think I've pretty much given everything I need to give.
I mean, we always try to add like our personal match of the week. I've got to admit, that Obafemi versus Eddie Thorpe match really blew me away. If the rest of the matches weren't quite up to that standard, but we sort of expect it in a main event match, especially for a brand championship. It's one of those. I think Obafemi and Eddie Thorpe put on a fantastic show. It was all fantastically done. I mean, Eddie Thorpe did a lot of the heavy lifting, in my opinion, but 100% believable match. And yeah, well deserved of a match of the night, at least from me. What about you, Rich? Have you?
I'm going to disagree with you. There? I am going to disagree with you. I'm going for a different title match tonight. Mine was the North American Championship match. Tony D'Angelo and Rich Holland. I think I really enjoyed that, and it wasn't just necessarily the match itself, but it was the start of that build with sort of like the whole of the family and the other members of the factions they're part of. So, I'm interested to see what's going to go down with that one.
The only other detail that neither of us mentioned about this show this evening is that in attendance, as well as some of the...
We had a Hall of Famer.
As well as we did.
I was going to mention this just at the start of the last section, but couldn't find the right place to introduce DDP because I think he's not worth a sneaky side entrance. He needs his own little bit on his own.
Well, this is why I thought we'll add this bit in right at the end. So yeah, we had Diamond Dallas Page, the holder of the move that is the precursor to the RKO, essentially. The
Diamond Cutter.
Good old Diamond Cutter. I mean, he does now a lot of work with retired superstars with his DDP yoga, which has done wonders for a lot of older retired talent, which are struggling, just generally trying to get themselves back on their feet. Essentially,
well, I've watched the video. I think it was a WWE production that he worked with Butterbean, and that was phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing some phenomenal work, and he's really turned his own life around. I mean, that guy had some serious substance abuse and alcohol abuse problems when he was on the road. The road was not kind to Diamond Dallas Page, but since giving up the time in the ring, he's really sort of turned himself around. Really, a poster child for reform, in my opinion. Because he was partying himself into an early grave, but don't get me wrong, that has had a physical toll on him, but he has done phenomenally well, and hats off to the Hall of Famer.
Yeah, no, of course. Right, well, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time with SmackDown. Peace out. Goodbye, Adam.
100%. Bye.